Hey everyone. If you're looking for a story that makes you question the true cost of perfection and the unexpected paths to love, hit that like button, subscribe to our channel, and let us know in the comments below where you're watching from and what time it is for you. It's always exciting to see who's joining us from around the world. The chef's downfall. The witch is home making dinner, Arthur Blackwood laughed. His tone was mocking, brazen, as if what he had just said was an excellent joke. Eleanor Hayes clenched her fists behind her office door. She didn't want to move, not even breathe, for fear Arthur would notice her presence. He was in the dining room, talking on the phone, completely oblivious that she was listening. Yeah, man, you know how she is. Always stuck in her kitchen smelling of garlic. He let out such a loud laugh that Eleanor's stomach churned. The typical wife who's only good for the basics, nothing more. No, don't worry. At the company party, you and I are going together, as always. No way she'll suspect. She doesn't even notice what's happening right in front of her nose. Eleanor felt as if the ground moved beneath her feet. For a moment, she thought she hadn't heard correctly. But there it was, Arthur's voice, clear and confident, talking to someone who obviously knew about the deception. She wanted to walk into the dining room and confront him right then and there, but something stopped her. Perhaps it was the tone of superiority in his voice, the way he mocked her, as if she were an object, as if she were nothing. When Arthur ended the call, Eleanor remained motionless. She heard him walk into the living room and turn on the television, as if he hadn't just shattered her. She put a hand to her mouth to stifle the urge to scream. She took a deep breath. No, she wasn't going to stoop to giving him the pleasure of seeing her humiliated. Not yet. She went to the bedroom and carefully closed the door. She sat on the edge of the bed, staring blankly. Arthur's words resonated in her head, repeating over and over again. The witch is home making dinner. She couldn't believe it. When had her marriage come to this? She thought of all the times she had supported him. When he quit his first job to find something better. When she worked double shifts to cover both their expenses. When he started at the company, and she celebrated each of his achievements as if they were her own. And now it all came down to this. She was the witch. That night she couldn't sleep. Arthur came into the room late, as always, and got into bed without even looking at her. Her blood boiled, but she remained calm. If she had learned anything in life, it was not to show weakness to someone who wants to see you defeated. The next morning, as Arthur left early for work, Eleanor made a decision. She wasn't going to wait for him to have the audacity to confess anything. Nor was she going to make a scene that would give him more reasons to mock her. No. If Arthur thought she was a witch at home, she was going to prove him very wrong. Eleanor closed the door behind Arthur and stood motionless for a moment, her gaze fixed on the doorknob. Her breathing was slow and heavy, as if something inside her was about to explode. But no, it wasn't time to lose control yet. She went to the dining room and saw Arthur's phone on the table. For an instant, she hesitated. It wasn't the first time he had left it forgotten at home, but this time it seemed like a gift from fate. She carefully picked up the device and unlocked it. She still remembered the pattern she had seen by chance. As she scrolled through the apps, she felt her chest tighten. Did she really want to know everything? Yes. She wanted to know who he was talking to. Who was this person giving him reasons to mock her? She went into the messages. The name Victoria appeared as one of the most recent contacts. Eleanor opened the conversation. Each message she read was like another stab. Are you going to sneak away today? You know I want to see you. Sure, but don't let the witch suspect anything, huh? See you at the party Friday, love. I promise this time you'll be my official date. Eleanor dropped the phone on the table, as if it burned her hands. The knot in her throat was unbearable, but she still didn't cry. She wasn't going to give Arthur that power. She picked up the device again, this time to check the photos. There they were. Images of Arthur hugging a woman in a restaurant, selfies in a hotel, even screenshots of conversations where Victoria referred to Eleanor as that poor woman. She stared at the screen for several minutes in silence. She couldn't believe what she was seeing. Everything was clear. Arthur was not only cheating on her, but he was doing it with premeditation and mockery. But for some reason, that initial pain began to transform into something else. Rage, determination. She wasn't going to let Arthur keep getting away with it. She put the phone back in its place just before Arthur could realize he had forgotten it. Then, she took her own agenda and began to make notes. She made a list. Stylist, dress, shoes, makeup. If she was going to confront them, she would do it on her own terms, not as the witch they imagined, but as a woman who could put them in their place without saying a single word. That same day, she started making calls. Her best friend Lucy, a designer with contacts in the fashion industry, was the first to answer. "Eleanor, are you okay?" Lucy asked, worried to hear the cold tone of her voice. "I need your help. I can't explain everything now, but I need you to get me the most spectacular dress you have, something that will make everyone stare at me." Lucy was silent for a few seconds before replying. "Okay, I'm not going to ask, but tell me exactly what you need. Trust me, just make sure it's unforgettable. What do you think Clara's ultimate plan is for the party? Will Ethan and Victoria be exposed? And what will be the fallout? Share your predictions below." The unveiling at the gala for the next few days, Eleanor dedicated herself to planning every detail. She had made a decision. She was going to Arthur's company party. That was her chance. She knew Victoria would be there, strutting as if everything belonged to her. But this time, Eleanor was going to show them both that she wasn't a woman to be trampled on. Friday night, as Arthur got ready in the bedroom, Eleanor remained calm in the living room. She heard him hum as he adjusted his tie in front of the mirror, completely oblivious to the plan she had prepared. "I'm leaving early, love," he said, peeking through the door. His smile was cynical, calculating. Eleanor barely looked up from the book she was holding. "Okay, take care," she replied, with a calmness that surprised even herself. As soon as she heard the door close, she stood up and began to get ready. The dress Lucy had designed for her hung on the hanger, waiting for its moment to shine. It was white, elegant, with a plunging neckline that enhanced her figure without being vulgar. The heels and jewelry she chose completed the look. When she finished getting ready, she looked at herself in the mirror and smiled. There she was, the woman Arthur had never valued. The taxi she ordered arrived just in time. She gave the address of the hall where the party was being held, and on the way, she mentally reviewed her plan. She wasn't going to cause a scene. She wasn't going to scream or cry. She was just going to walk in and let her presence speak for itself. When she arrived, the doorman looked at her curiously, but let her pass without asking questions. In the hall, the sound of music and laughter filled the space. Eleanor walked slowly towards the center, head held high. Immediately, heads turned towards her. Murmurs began. And then she saw him. Arthur was at the back, a glass of wine in his hand, laughing with Victoria. Both froze as soon as their eyes met Eleanor's. The war had begun. Arthur stood motionless, the wine glass suspended in the air, as if he had forgotten the simple act of breathing. Victoria, standing next to him, looked at him strangely, oblivious to the whirlwind of emotions passing through his mind. Eleanor advanced with firm steps, her every movement resonating with elegance and determination. The music continued to play, but the murmur of the attendees began to fill the hall. "Who is she?" someone asked near the bar. "I don't know, but what presents?" another voice replied. Eleanor pretended not to hear. Her gaze was fixed on Arthur, but her lips held a faint smile, as if she knew something others didn't. When she was close enough to him, she stopped. Arthur tried to compose himself, but the sweat beginning to bead on his forehead betrayed him. "Eleanor, what are you doing here?" he murmured, too low for others to hear. "I thought it would be fun to surprise you," she replied with a neutral, almost innocent tone, but her eyes shone with an intensity that disarmed him. Victoria, who until that moment had remained silent, watched the scene with a mix of curiosity and distrust. "Arthur, aren't you going to introduce us?" she asked, looking Eleanor up and down. Eleanor turned to Victoria with a polite smile, as if she were just any stranger. She extended a firm but kind hand. "Eleanor Hayes, Arthur's wife," she said, with a clarity that cut through the party's bustle like lightning. Victoria's face transformed. The confidence she had shown a second earlier vanished, replaced by an expression of pure discomfort. Arthur tried to interrupt, but the words seemed to stick in his throat. Eleanor seized the moment to take a glass of champagne from a nearby tray and took a small sip, as if it were all a matter of no importance. "Oh," Victoria murmured, finally finding her voice. "I didn't know you'd be here." "Nor did I know you'd come," Eleanor replied, without losing her composure, her smile now sharp as a knife. "But you see, life is full of surprises." Arthur tried to intervene, moving between them both, but Eleanor had already captured the attention of the guests. Some moved closer, feigning interest in the conversation, while others watched from afar, enjoying the spectacle. "Eleanor, this is not the place for this," Arthur said finally, his tone attempting to be firm, but sounding more like a plea. "For what?" she replied, raising an eyebrow. "To accompany my husband on his big night, or to meet the important people in your life?" She cast a quick glance at Victoria, who was now holding her glass with both hands, trying to remain composed. At that moment, an older man with silver hair and impeccable posture approached the group. Eleanor recognized him immediately. He was the CEO of the company, Mr. George Thompson. She had seen his photo on the firm's website. He smiled, seemingly oblivious to the tension between them. "And who is this charming lady?" he asked, addressing Eleanor. Before Arthur could answer, Eleanor extended a hand confidently. "Eleanor Hayes, a pleasure to meet you. I've heard a lot about your work," she said, keeping her voice firm but warm. Mr. Thompson returned her smile, impressed by her poise and confidence. "Ah, you're Arthur's wife? What a pleasant surprise. I didn't know we had someone so distinguished in the company family." "It's an honor to be here," she replied, ignoring Arthur's murderous glare. "I've always believed that surrounding oneself with brilliant people is essential for any success, and it seems your company is full of talent." Mr. Thompson chuckled, delighted with the compliment. "Well, I hope you're enjoying the night. It will be a pleasure to chat more later." He patted Arthur on the shoulder before walking away, but not without casting one last appreciative look at Eleanor. When Mr. Thompson disappeared into the crowd, Arthur turned to Eleanor, his face red with contained rage. "What do you think you're doing?" he whispered through gritted teeth, his voice barely controlled. "I'm simply supporting my husband, as I always have," she replied calmly. Victoria, feeling the moment was too awkward, quickly excused herself, leaving Arthur and Eleanor alone. But before leaving, Eleanor leaned towards Victoria with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Don't worry, Victoria. It's always a pleasure to meet my husband's friends." Victoria didn't respond, only walked away with hurried steps, trying to maintain her dignity. Arthur, now more vulnerable than ever, put a hand to his face, trying to regain his composure. Eleanor, for her part, turned and began to walk towards the center of the hall, leaving her husband, his rage, and his chaos behind. She knew the real impact was yet to come. She had won the first battle, but the war had just begun. What do you think Eleanor's ultimate goal is for the night? Will Arthur and Victoria be fully exposed? And what will be the fallout of her bold actions? Share your predictions below. The domino effect. Eleanor advanced with firm steps towards the center of the hall, knowing that all eyes remained on her. The slight smile on her lips was calculated, just enough to convey confidence without appearing arrogant. Her mind worked fast, analyzing every movement, every reaction. She was aware that her arrival had caused an impact, but the night had just begun, and her plan was far from over. A group of well-dressed people conversed near the bar. She recognized one of them, Mr. George Thompson, the CEO. Arthur deeply admired him, always talking about how he was the perfect boss. Eleanor decided to approach. She didn't need to do much, just let the pieces fall into place. "Mr. Thompson, excuse me if I interrupt," she said with a clear voice, catching the attention of everyone in the group. The man looked up and smiled in recognition. "Eleanor!" he exclaimed, extending a hand to invite her into the circle. "Please come. I want to introduce you to some colleagues." Eleanor joined the group with impeccable naturalness, as if she had been at such events all her life. George began to introduce her, mentioning that she was Arthur's wife, which piqued the interest of those present. Questions came fast. "And what do you do, Eleanor?" asked an elegant woman in a navy blue dress. "I run a catering business," Eleanor replied with a smile. "I started a few years ago, small at first, but it's been growing. Now we cater important events like weddings and galas." "Interesting," another man intervened, with a tone that denoted genuine interest. "Arthur never mentioned your business." Eleanor noticed the slight shift in the atmosphere. The glances towards Arthur, who was now near them but too uncomfortable to intervene, began to become more inquisitive. She remained composed, unhurried. "Well, sometimes one underestimates what's close by," she said with a casual tone, but the phrase fell like a stone in the water, causing small murmurs among the group. The topic quickly changed, and George, impressed by Eleanor, began to talk to her about his own projects. Meanwhile, Arthur remained in a corner, unable to act. He knew that anything he said would only worsen the situation. Eleanor, on the other hand, had gained the attention of the most important leaders of the company, making it clear that she was not the witch Arthur had painted in his mockery. A few minutes later, Arthur finally approached. With a forced smile, he tried to intervene in the conversation. "Eleanor, I think we should talk," he said, his voice barely controlling his frustration. Eleanor looked at him calmly, as if considering the proposal, but then turned to Mr. Thompson. "Excuse me for a moment. It seems my husband needs something," she said, before following Arthur to a secluded corner. When they were far enough from the others, Arthur exploded. "What on earth do you think you're doing?" he said in a low voice but with fury. "Why are you here?" "Why shouldn't I be here?" Eleanor replied with a calmness that irritated him even more. "I'm your wife, remember? That means I have every right to support you at your important events. It's what a good couple does, isn't it?" Arthur ran a hand through his hair, desperate. "This isn't a game, Eleanor. You're getting involved in things you don't understand." "Things like your lies?" she asked, leaning in a little towards him. Her tone was still low, but each word was laden with intent. "Or like your mistress. What part of that do I not understand, Arthur?" He paled. For a few seconds, he seemed speechless. Then he regained some composure. "Not here, Eleanor. Don't do this here." "Don't worry. I'm not going to ruin your precious party," she said, crossing her arms. "But I assure you, this won't be the end of it. Enjoy the night while you can." Before he could respond, Eleanor turned and returned to the center of the hall. As she walked, she felt adrenaline coursing through her body. She knew she had cornered him, but she wasn't going to stop there. When she rejoined George and the others, they were still talking animatedly. George, seeing her return, smiled and raised his glass. "Eleanor, would you like to discuss business sometime? My wife and I are organizing an event, and I think we might need your services." "It would be an honor," Eleanor replied, returning his smile. "I'm sure we can make something spectacular." Arthur, now at a distance, observed the scene. His face hardened. At that moment, he understood that he had underestimated Eleanor, and that mistake was beginning to cost him dearly. But for Eleanor, the night still held more surprises. The game had just begun. What will be Eleanor's final move to expose Arthur and Victoria's betrayal? How will the corporate world react to the scandal? And what will be the ultimate consequences for Arthur? Share your predictions below. The unstoppable ascent. The tension in the hall was palpable. Eleanor had managed to attract the attention of the night's most important attendees, while Arthur remained on the sidelines, unable to regain control. Victoria, for her part, had disappeared among the guests, trying to avoid any direct confrontation. But Eleanor was not willing to let the night end without delivering the final blow. After finishing her conversation with Mr. Thompson, Eleanor took a glass of champagne and approached a group that was right in the center of the hall, where the conversation seemed most animated. Some faces were familiar, but others were not. One of them was a tall woman, in a fitted red dress with a haughty posture. She recognized her instantly. One of the main partners of the company, Ms. Clara Vance. "Excuse me for joining without an invitation," Eleanor said with a calm smile. "But I overheard you talking about the party and couldn't resist." Olivia looked her up and down, assessing her before smiling. "Please, don't apologize. You're Eleanor Hayes, Arthur's wife," she replied confidently, extending her hand. Olivia raised her eyebrows in surprise. "Oh, of course. I've heard a lot about you. Well, at least about your husband. But what a surprise to meet you." Eleanor noticed the curious tone in Olivia's words. She knew that people in that circle were accustomed to measuring every gesture and word. She decided to take the lead. "Truth be told, I like to keep a low profile," she said, bringing the glass to her lips. "But I thought it was a good time to support my husband, considering how important this night is for him, though I must admit surprises have not been lacking." Olivia nodded, clearly intrigued. "Surprises?" she asked, encouraging her to continue. Before Eleanor could answer, Arthur appeared next to the group, his face tense, but trying to hide it. He stood beside Olivia and placed a hand on her shoulder. "Olivia, can we talk for a moment?" he asked, ignoring Eleanor completely. "Of course, Arthur. But first I was listening to your wife. It seems she has something interesting to share with us." Eleanor saw Arthur's jaw tighten. She knew he was losing control of the situation, and she was enjoying every second. "Nothing too important," Eleanor said with a casual tone, though her words were a dagger aimed at Arthur. "Just commenting on how curious it is that one can live for years with someone and still encounter surprises on nights like this." Arthur opened his mouth to retort, but was interrupted by another voice. "Arthur!" Victoria, who had been trying to avoid attention, suddenly appeared, visibly nervous. Her appearance was so clumsy that it caught everyone's attention in the group. Olivia looked at Victoria with interest, and then glanced at Eleanor. "And who is this?" Olivia asked, addressing Eleanor directly. Eleanor didn't miss a beat. With a sharp smile, she turned to Victoria and replied with absolute calm. "Oh, that's Victoria, a close friend of my husband's. You know how Arthur is, always surrounded by interesting people." The declaration dropped like a bomb on the group. Olivia raised her eyebrows, while the others exchanged awkward glances. Arthur, now pale, tried to intervene. "Eleanor, I think that's enough," he said through clenched teeth, with a mix of desperation and anger. "Enough?" Eleanor replied, turning to face him directly. "Of course, you're right. Perhaps we should leave it here. Or perhaps I should tell everyone how Arthur and Victoria spend so much time together outside the office." A murmur went through the group. Olivia, visibly uncomfortable but fascinated by the drama, took a step back, letting the scene unfold. Victoria, for her part, seemed about to explode, but couldn't find the words to defend herself. Eleanor, seeing that everyone's attention was completely on them, decided to deliver the final blow. "The truth is, I came tonight to understand something," she said, looking directly at Arthur. "When did you decide that I, the woman who stood by you through everything, was less than enough for you? Because it seems someone here believes they can walk through life without consequences." Arthur didn't respond. His silence was deafening. Victoria, unable to bear it any longer, dropped her glass and hastily left the hall, with dozens of eyes following her. Olivia, who had been observing everything, turned to Arthur with coldness. "I think you'll need very clear explanations for this, Arthur, especially when Mr. Thompson finds out." With that phrase, she turned and disappeared into the crowd. Arthur, defeated and humiliated, could do nothing but remain silent. Eleanor, satisfied but still composed, raised her glass and took one last sip before turning to him. "Don't worry, Arthur. This is just the beginning." Without another word, she walked away, leaving Arthur alone in the midst of all the attendees' gazes. The night, which had begun as his moment of glory, had turned into his greatest nightmare. Eleanor, on the other hand, knew that the power was now completely on her side. Arthur remained motionless in the center of the hall, the attendees' gazes fixed on him like needles. The murmur grew around him, but he couldn't distinguish words. He only saw Eleanor walking away with a firm stride, leaving behind her a silence charged with authority. The blow he had just received was monumental, but what consumed him most was the fact that he hadn't seen it coming. Eleanor, for her part, left the circle of attention and headed towards one of the hall's terraces. She needed a moment to process everything. She had maintained her composure in front of Arthur and Victoria, but her heart was still pounding. She took a breath, leaning on the railing, and let the breeze cool her face. She had won that first battle, but she knew the night wasn't over. A male voice interrupted her thoughts. "Excuse me, may I join you?" asked Mr. George Thompson, appearing behind her with a glass in his hand. Eleanor turned and nodded with a smile. George was an older man, with intelligent eyes and an imposing presence, but his tone was kind. "Of course, Mr. Thompson. It's a pleasure." The man stood beside her, looking out at the illuminated city. "You know, I've been with this company for many years," he began reflectively, "and rarely have I seen anything as interesting as what happened a few moments ago." Eleanor chuckled softly, without looking away from the lights. "I hope it wasn't too uncomfortable for you," she replied. "Not for me, but I think Arthur can't say the same," George retorted with a half smile. "Tell me, Eleanor, why did you decide to come tonight?" Eleanor looked down at her glass, thinking about how to answer. She didn't want to appear a victim, but she also didn't plan to hide the truth. "The truth, Mr. Thompson, I came because I believe that sometimes things must be faced directly," she finally said. "I can't pretend that everything is fine when it's not, especially when someone thinks they can play with my life as if it had no value." George looked at her with approval. "That's something I deeply respect. Very few have the courage to do what you did tonight. But it also makes me wonder how far you're willing to go." Eleanor looked at him directly, her eyes reflecting the same determination she had shown all night. "As far as necessary, Mr. Thompson. Not to destroy, but to reclaim what I deserve." George slowly nodded, as if evaluating every word. Then he raised his glass in a toast. "To brave women like you, Eleanor. I think you have a lot ahead of you." They clinked glasses, and George retreated, leaving her alone again. Eleanor felt those words give her more strength. She was not willing to back down. Tonight was not just about confronting Arthur, but about proving to herself that she was capable of much more. When she returned to the hall, the attention was no longer focused on Arthur. Some guests were still talking quietly, but many had already resumed the party, as if nothing had happened. However, Eleanor knew that the impact would be etched in the minds of everyone present, especially in those of Arthur's superiors. At that moment, Ms. Clara Vance approached Eleanor with a glass of wine in her hand. Her face reflected a mix of admiration and curiosity. "You've got guts, Eleanor," she said with a slight smile. "I don't know if I would have had the same nerve." "Sometimes it's not about nerve, Clara," Eleanor replied, returning the smile. "It's about deciding what you're willing to tolerate and what you're not." Clara slightly tilted her head, as if the answer seemed interesting. "Well, let me tell you something. Things in this company move fast, and what you did today will be remembered. And I don't just mean Arthur." Eleanor looked at her, noticing that her words carried a double meaning. "I hope it's for the best," she replied cautiously. "That depends on you," Clara said, before retreating with a smile that left many questions in the air. Eleanor didn't have time to analyze it. At that moment, Arthur appeared in front of her, this time with a completely changed face. There was no longer anger or rage, only desperation. "Eleanor, we have to talk," he said in a low, almost pleading tone. "We've talked enough, Arthur," she replied, maintaining her calm. "Please, this can't end like this." He leaned towards her, as if the words were about to break him. "I made a mistake, I know, but we can fix it, I swear to you." Eleanor looked at him for a moment, analyzing every line on his face. It was the first time in a long time that she saw something genuine in him, but that wasn't enough, not after everything he had done. "Arthur, it's not just a mistake. It's a chain of decisions you made, knowing exactly what you were doing. And now, the consequences, I can't stop them. It's your turn to face them." He tried to retort, but Eleanor had already finished that conversation. Without another word, she turned and walked away, leaving Arthur alone once again. The night, which had begun as his moment of glory, had turned into his greatest nightmare. Eleanor, on the other hand, knew that the power was now completely on her side. What will be Eleanor's final move to expose Arthur and Victoria's betrayal? How will the corporate world react to the scandal? And what will be the ultimate consequences for Arthur? Share your predictions below. The Phoenix Rises. Eleanor woke up the next day with a sense of relief mixed with renewed energy. She sat on the edge of the bed, mentally reviewing the events of the previous night. She had confronted Arthur, and although the confrontation had not been easy, she knew she had achieved her purpose. However, loose ends remained. Arthur's downfall was not complete, and now it was time to seal his fate. After a quick shower, she sat in front of her computer and began to write an email. She knew that in situations like this, words were her best tool. The recipient was Mr. George Thompson, the man who had shown respect and admiration for her courage the night before. Her message was direct but elegant. "Dear Mr. Thompson, I want to thank you again for the impeccable work you performed at our gala. Your talent and dedication not only exceeded our expectations, but left an indelible mark on everyone who attended. That said, I would like to propose something more ambitious. I am organizing an event in New York City with a group of international entrepreneurs, and I believe your vision and your team are exactly what we need. If you are interested, let's talk. I am sure this could be a new stage for you and your business. Respectfully and admiringly, Eleanor Hayes." She didn't need to say more. She knew George was an intelligent man and would understand the message between the lines. She wanted to make it clear that she was not seeking to harm Arthur directly, but was willing to take control of her life and show her worth. When she pressed send, she felt a weight lift from her shoulders. Later, she decided to meet with Lucy, her friend and ally in this journey. They met at an outdoor cafe, a quiet place where they could talk without interruption. Lucy arrived with a wide smile, visibly excited about what had occurred at the party. "Eleanor!" she exclaimed, giving her a hug. "You were incredible. I've heard comments from people who were at the party, and everyone is talking about you." Eleanor chuckled softly, grateful for her friend's effusiveness. "Well, it's not over yet, Lucy. I need to make sure this experience leads to something more than just a dramatic scene." Lucy nodded, understanding the message. "What do you have in mind?" "First, strengthen my business. The people I met last night are contacts who can help me take my catering to another level. If I play my cards right, this can be the start of something big." Lucy smiled, approving of the strategy. Then she leaned forward, with a gleam of curiosity in her eyes. "And Arthur? What are you going to do with him?" Eleanor was silent for a few seconds, taking a sip of her coffee. Then she looked up, showing an unbreakable determination. "With Arthur, I've already done what I had to do. Now it's a matter of time. His arrogance led him to this point, and the rest of the pieces will fall into place on their own." And so it was. Days later, the consequences began to manifest. The email Eleanor sent to Mr. Thompson not only left a favorable impression on him, but also sparked an internal conversation in the company. Rumors about Arthur and his relationship with Victoria were no longer just an open secret. Now they were a matter of concern for top management. The company had a reputation to protect, and Arthur, who was once seen as a promise, was now a risk. Eleanor didn't have to lift another finger. Arthur's own mistakes began to drag him down. Mr. Thompson and Ms. Clara Vance led an internal review of his performance, finding inconsistencies in his management and unprofessional attitudes. It was a matter of weeks before Arthur received an ultimatum: either resign voluntarily or face a formal investigation. Meanwhile, Eleanor took advantage of the momentum the party had given her. One of the people she met, an entrepreneur dedicated to organizing high-level events, offered her a contract to cater an exclusive wedding. It was the opportunity she had been waiting for to expand her business. The morning Arthur packed his things to leave the company, Eleanor received a message from him. It was brief, almost desperate. "Eleanor, please, let's talk. I know I failed, but I don't want to lose you." She read the message several times before deciding not to respond. There was nothing left to say. Arthur had made his decisions, and so had she. Her silence was her answer. That night, while reviewing the details of the new contract, Eleanor received another call. This time, it was Mr. Thompson. "Eleanor, I hope you're well. I wanted to inform you that we've decided to entrust you with the catering for our next gala. I think after the impression you left, it's only fair to give you that opportunity." Eleanor smiled, grateful, but also aware of the effort she had put in to get there. "Thank you, Mr. Thompson. I assure you, you won't regret it." When she hung up, she looked out her living room window, seeing the city lights. For the first time in a long time, she felt she had complete control of her life. She was not the witch at home making dinner. She was Eleanor Hayes, a woman who had faced betrayal, pain, and contempt, and had emerged stronger than ever. Arthur's downfall was just one chapter in her story. Now, her true ascent was about to begin. The sun gently set over London as Eleanor finalized the details for the most important event she had managed to date: Mr. Thompson's gala. The opportunity was immense, and with it came the pressure. She couldn't afford any mistakes. This was her calling card to the world of high-level events. Since she had received the call from Mr. Thompson, her team had worked tirelessly to create something spectacular. Everything had to be perfect, from the dishes to the decor. Eleanor personally oversaw every detail, demonstrating that her leadership skills and her eye for perfection were unparalleled. On the way to the event, sitting in the back of a taxi, Eleanor mentally reviewed every aspect of the plan. However, this time she didn't feel the anxiety that would have consumed her in the past. She now knew she was stronger, more confident, and that she could face any obstacle. The hall where the gala would be held was an exclusive venue, decorated with glittering chandeliers and elegantly set tables. When Eleanor arrived, the vendors were already finishing up the last details. Her team greeted her with nervous but confident smiles. "Everything's ready, boss," said Teresa, her assistant. "The first trays are going into the kitchen, and guests will arrive in half an hour." Eleanor nodded, adjusting her black jacket. Although she was accustomed to wearing aprons and simpler clothes, tonight she decided to dress for the occasion. She knew that, in addition to the food, her professional image also had to make an impact. When guests began to arrive, Eleanor remained on the sidelines, observing how her team executed the plan. With precision. From the background music to the impeccable service, everything unfolded as she had envisioned. But then, among the figures entering through the main doors, a familiar silhouette caught her attention. Arthur. Eleanor felt a pang in her stomach, but quickly composed herself. She wasn't going to let his presence ruin what she had built. He wasn't coming as an official guest. That was obvious. He had probably arrived with an acquaintance, trying to find a way to regain ground after his fall. The image of Arthur entering the hall in a suit that no longer projected the same confidence as before seemed almost pathetic to her. Determined to maintain control, Eleanor resumed her role as supervisor, checking in with her team and ensuring every guest was satisfied. But she couldn't ignore that Arthur was looking for her. And indeed, a few minutes later, he was in front of her. "Eleanor," he said, the ghost of the man he used to be. There was something different about him, a mixture of shame and desperation. "I need to talk to you. Just a few minutes, please." Eleanor looked at him calmly, crossing her arms. "What do you want to talk about, Arthur? About how you ruined your life? About how you underestimated me? Because I don't see what else you could add." Arthur looked down, defeated. There was no anger on his face, only regret. "I know. I made a mistake in everything," he admitted. "I lost my job. I lost Victoria. And worst of all, I lost you. I didn't realize what I had until I ruined everything." Eleanor felt a slight pang of compassion, but she didn't let it weaken her. She had come too far to ever again be the woman who bowed to a man's words. "Arthur, I gave you everything of myself for years," she replied with a firmness that allowed no reply. "And all you did was mock me, take advantage of me, and betray me. Now you're here because you know you have nothing. But let me tell you something. What you're looking for is no longer available." He tried to respond, but she raised a hand to stop him. "I don't need your apologies. I don't want them. All I want is for you to go your way, as far from me as possible." Arthur looked at her for a few seconds, as if trying to cling to some last hope, but finally nodded. Without another word, he turned and walked away, disappearing among the guests. Eleanor watched him go, feeling a weight lift from her shoulders. For the first time, she had truly let him go. The night continued without further interruptions, and when Mr. Thompson stood to give a speech, he mentioned the excellent work of Eleanor and her team, drawing applause from everyone present. Eleanor allowed herself a satisfied smile. She had passed the test. When the gala ended and the guests began to leave, Eleanor stayed a few minutes longer in the empty hall. She looked around, seeing how her vision had come to life. That night had not only solidified her place in the professional world, but also sealed a new chapter in her life. Walking towards the exit, her heels echoing on the marble floor, Eleanor felt invincible. She was not the same woman Arthur had underestimated. Now she was a woman who knew who she was, what she was worth, and what she deserved. And that certainty was the beginning of something much bigger. What do you think the future holds for Eleanor and her thriving business? How will her newfound strength continue to shape her path? Share your thoughts below. A new horizon. A week after the gala, Eleanor found herself in her office, surrounded by papers and proposals. Her catering business was taking off like never before. The recommendations that emerged from the event with Mr. Thompson had reached unexpected clients, international companies, local celebrities, and even high-profile charitable organizations. It was overwhelming, but also exciting. For the first time, she felt that her work was recognized for its worth, not as an extension of someone else. As she reviewed contracts, Teresa entered with an envelope in her hands. "Eleanor, this arrived this morning. It's from Mr. Thompson's firm." Eleanor looked up, intrigued, took the envelope, and opened it carefully. Inside was a handwritten letter, something unusual in those times. She recognized Mr. Thompson's firm but elegant handwriting. "Dear Eleanor, I want to congratulate you again for the impeccable work you performed at our gala. Your talent and dedication not only exceeded our expectations, but left an indelible mark on all who attended. That said, I would like to propose something more ambitious. I am organizing an event in New York City with a group of international entrepreneurs, and I believe your vision and your team are exactly what we need. If you are interested, let's talk. I am sure this could be a new stage for you and your business. Respectfully and admiringly, George Thompson." Eleanor finished writing the letter and let out an incredulous laugh. New York City. She had never imagined that her business could cross borders. Teresa, who had been watching her curiously, couldn't help but ask, "Good news?" Eleanor nodded, showing her the letter. "It seems they're inviting us to play in the big leagues." Teresa let out a small shriek of excitement, but Eleanor raised a hand, laughing. "First, we'll talk to George and make sure this is something we can handle. If we're going to take this leap, I want to do it right." That same afternoon, Eleanor called Mr. Thompson. During the conversation, he explained the details of the event, a high-level gathering of entrepreneurs from various industries. Catering would be an essential part, and George wanted something that reflected authenticity and sophistication. Eleanor, confident in her team and in what they had achieved, accepted the challenge. But as she moved forward with the preparations for the trip, one last unexpected twist presented itself in her life. One afternoon, as she finished a meeting with her team, she received a call from an unknown number. She hesitated for a moment but decided to answer. "Hello? Eleanor Hayes?" a male voice on the other end of the line asked. My name is Daniel Miller. I work as a corporate lawyer, and I'm calling because I represent Victoria Stone's interests. The name made Eleanor lean back in her chair. Victoria? What could she want from her? "What do you want?" she asked cautiously. "My client asked me to contact you to propose a meeting. It's a personal and business matter." Eleanor chuckled, incredulous. "I don't think we have anything to discuss. Tell your client I wish her luck, but I don't see the need to talk to her." "I understand your position, Ms. Hayes, but I think this might interest you. My client is not looking for a confrontation. On the contrary, she has an offer that she believes will benefit both parties." Eleanor hesitated, Every instinct told her to hang up, but curiosity was a difficult enemy to ignore. Okay, but it will be on my terms. Tell her if she wants to talk to me, to come to my office. I'm not moving to meet her. The lawyer accepted quickly, and the next day, Victoria appeared in Eleanor's office. She wore an impeccable suit, her hair perfectly styled, but her expression was tense, far from the confidence she had displayed at the party weeks ago. "Eleanor, thank you for seeing me," she said upon entering, trying to sound cordial. "I'm not going to lie to you, Victoria. I'm here out of curiosity, not interest. So, what do you want?" Eleanor replied cuttingly. Victoria sat across from her, placing a portfolio on the table. "I made mistakes, I admit it, but I'm not here to talk about the past. I'm here because I have a proposal. I've lost the support I had at Arthur's company, and I'm looking for new allies. I know you're growing fast, and you have something to offer the market that I never had: respect and credibility." Eleanor crossed her arms, studying her. The woman in front of her didn't seem like the same one who had looked at her with disdain at the party. "What exactly are you proposing?" "An alliance. I know how the event market works, and I have contacts in other cities that could help you expand even faster. I'm not looking to compete with you. I'm looking to collaborate." Eleanor remained silent, considering Victoria's words. It was a tempting proposal, but she couldn't ignore who was in front of her. Finally, she smiled. "I'll think about it, Victoria. But if we do end up working together, I want to make something clear. This time, I set the rules." Victoria nodded, accepting her position without argument. Eleanor knew she was at a crossroads. The decision she made would determine the future of her business, and perhaps a new stage in her life. But this time, she was no longer afraid. She had built something from the ashes, and now she knew there were no limits to what she could achieve. Months later, Eleanor was in New York City, overseeing the final details of the international event Mr. Thompson had entrusted her with. The luxury hotel ballroom glittered with chandeliers, elegantly set tables, and an atmosphere that combined sophistication with warmth. Her team had worked tirelessly, and now everything was ready. Eleanor stopped in the center of the hall, observing the result of months of effort. The food platters, carefully prepared to reflect the flavors of London, were a work of art. Her business had reached a level she had never imagined. But it wasn't just professional success that filled her with satisfaction. It was the knowledge that everything she had achieved was the fruit of her courage, her hard work, and her ability to rise even in the darkest moments. Before the event, she had made the decision not to accept Victoria's proposal. Although her offer made sense from a strategic standpoint, Eleanor knew she couldn't build the future of her business with someone who represented the past she had left behind. Instead of alliances, she decided to bet on independence. "It's nothing personal, Victoria," she had told her during their last meeting, "but what I'm building doesn't need shortcuts or forced partnerships. I've come this far on my own, and I prefer to continue that way." Victoria accepted the decision with a slight nod, though in her eyes there was a mix of resignation and respect. Eleanor never heard from her again after that meeting, but she didn't care either. The event in New York City was a resounding success. Entrepreneurs from all over the world were fascinated by the quality of the food, the event design, and the professionalism of Eleanor's team. At the end of the night, Mr. Thompson approached her with a glass of wine in his hand. "Eleanor, you have exceeded all my expectations," he said with a wide smile. "This is just the beginning. If you continue like this, there will be no limits to what you can achieve." "Thank you, Mr. Thompson. It means a lot to me that you trusted my team and me," Eleanor replied. "I trust you because you deserve it. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." That night, as she returned to her hotel, Eleanor thought about George's words and everything that had happened to get her there. Arthur, Victoria, the humiliations and betrayals. It all seemed like a distant memory, part of a life that no longer belonged to her. Back in London, Eleanor found a letter waiting for her in her office. It was from Arthur. At first, she hesitated to open it, but finally did. The message was short and simple. "Eleanor, I know I don't deserve you to read this, but I wanted to thank you. Losing you was the worst thing that ever happened to me, but it also taught me many things. I understand now the harm I caused and how I underestimated the incredible woman you always had within you. I wish you success and happiness, Arthur." Eleanor put the letter on her desk, feeling a strange mix of emotions. There was no resentment in her, only a calm that came from knowing she had closed that chapter of her life. Arthur no longer had power over her, and although his words were an attempt at redemption, Eleanor knew that the only forgiveness she needed was her own. One afternoon, weeks after her return, Eleanor was sitting on the terrace of her new apartment in Chelsea. With a glass of wine in her hand, she looked at the city lights. Beside her, Teresa reviewed the schedule of upcoming events. "What's next after this, boss?" Teresa asked excitedly. "Because it seems you've already achieved everything." Eleanor smiled thoughtfully. "There's still a lot to do, but now I'm clear that what we build will be on our own terms." The sound of cars in the distance and the murmur of the city accompanied her words. Eleanor raised her glass, silently toasting herself and everything she had achieved. She had reclaimed her life, her dignity, and her identity, and now she was ready to conquer the world, one step at a time. She had been reborn, and this time, she was invincible. What do you think is the true meaning of invincible for Eleanor? How will her journey of self-discovery inspire others? Share your thoughts below.